All right, guys, we got a fun stream today. We're going to be joined by, as I bring him in now, current recruiting coordinator and not only a good friend of mine, but a former coaches with Georgia Tech, but current recruiting coordinator for Kent State, Zeke Pinkham. So, Zeke, thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle.
Yeah,
happy to be here.
awesome. So, while we give some people a little bit of time to kind of join, I wanted to go over, just read a little bio about you. Obviously, you've got some accolades. You've done some stuff in college baseball now. So I figured, give credit where credit's due. As hard as that is for me to say, we're going to do it. So, Zeke was hired this summer to take over the recruiting coordinator role at Kent State. Pinkham comes to Kent State from Georgia Tech, where he served as an assistant coach for the past 5 seasons under former Kent State skipper Danny Hall. Pinkham worked primarily with catchers in addition to his assistant coach duties. He helped Kevin Parada win the Buster Posey Award and Johnny Bench catching awards before becoming a first-round draft pick. In his 5 seasons in Atlanta, Georgia Tech won 30-plus games in 4 full seasons and made 3 NCAA regionals. Prior to Georgia Tech, Pinkham was a graduate assistant at his alma mater, Louisville. There he worked with the catchers and mentored future number 1 overall pick Henry Davis and second-round selection Dalton Rushing. He was a 4-year member of the Cardinals baseball team, starting in 59 games at catcher from 2016 to 2019. During his 4-year career, the Cardinals made 2 Men's College World Series in 2017 and 2019. Pinkham captained the 2019 squad while hitting .324 in 41 games, including 33 starts. So obviously, Zeke, you've done one thing in your career that I haven't. You got to play in the College World Series, and you got to do it multiple times. But before we get into all the recruiting changes and all the stuff that's gone on, and obviously we'll have questions from people in the chat as well. But to start it off, obviously, you played the game at a high level at one of the best programs in the country at Louisville. You've had the opportunity really to learn under. If people don't consider Dan McDonnell a legend, he will be by the time his career is over, right? His coaching career is on that trajectory with what he's done at Louisville and in his entire career, and then under Danny Hall. So how have those two guys affected the way you coach now that you're away from him?
Yeah, great question. Both those guys are so unique in how they approach everything. I got to see, 2 different sides of it. Playing for Mac at Louisville, I got to play for him, and then I got to coach with him for a year as a graduate assistant. So I got to see 2 different sides of him,
Sure.
Which was really cool. When you're playing for someone that demands a lot of you, and then see the coaching side of them, and you're like, holy crap, this guy's really cool, actually. So you get to see that side of him, and then working for Coach Hall, who you played for, was awesome as well, man. Both those guys just are relentless competitors. They're relentless at recruiting. And they're always working towards one thing, which is going towards Omaha. And you don't have much longevity in this profession if that isn't your goal. And both those guys obviously are 2 of the best to ever do it. They're always working towards Omaha, building relationships, recruiting. I mean, both those guys have won at a really high level.
Yeah, I mean, and again, Dan McDonnell is going to be a Hall of Fame coach with what he's already done in his career. So you've had a big impact on, as I read, I mean, Kevin Parada, first round pick out of Georgia Tech. You got to work with him for, I think, his whole career. Mm-hmm. You got to work with Henry Davis at Louisville, Dalton Rushing. So when you're working with those guys, what stuff on the defensive side are you really drilling down to them?
I think as a coach, especially on the catching side of things, man, you got to find what makes those guys tick. And not just that, you got to find what makes them comfortable. You got to put them in a position to have success. Those 3 guys were so unique and different in each way. You look at Henry. Henry had one of the best arms behind the plate I've ever seen. And, I mean, he caught, I don't know, probably 60, 70 games in the big leagues this year. Yeah. And has a rifle for an arm. One thing he had to get better at was, just receiving, the blocking side of things. But one thing he always had was the arm strength. And he had the leadership qualities, man. That guy could really lead. He was really tough, which is definitely a tool that most catchers need. Actually, all catchers need. He had that, and then you had Dalton. Dalton was a big, thick dude, still is. He's in AAA. He's having a really good minor league career so far. But one thing that he did that stood out to me is he was really athletic, which was very similar to Parada. Both those guys were really athletic. They were really able to move laterally. They, had really good hands, where one was a good receiver when he first got there, and then you had Kevin, who needed to work on receiving, who just got better and better as his career has gone on. But the three things that those guys all had in common was work ethic. Man, those guys just straight up got after it on a daily basis, as they knew they had a lot of potential and they knew they had an opportunity to, make a lot of money in this game. And all three of those guys have really capitalized on that.
100%. 100%. So one question from a guy he's the most valuable chatter whenever I do these, Zeke. So Canes, unfortunately, Zeke, he's a Miami Hurricanes guy. He's a Miami Hurricanes fan. Question to Coach Pinkham: how did your process change? And remember, Canes, he just took over the recruiting role at Kent, but he was, obviously involved in recruiting at Georgia Tech. How did your process change from August 1st last season in 2023 with the new rules to now 2024 August 1st, where some places are getting increased scholarships but less spots?
So I'll say it like this. Each program is going to be different depending on the type of support that you have from your athletic department and how much money you're able to fundraise. I can't speak on every single school, but some schools are going to be more fortunate than others to have more scholarships. I'll say it like this: with the rosters going from 40 to 34, there aren't going to be many schools, if any, that are going to be at 34 full scholarships. So
sure,
you're going to have to be strategic on divvying that up. Now, some schools are going to have more, like, we have a goal. Let's say our goal is to get to 18, 19 scholarships. That's a lot of scholarships, a lot of money we had to fundraise and get support from. But that could be a goal. And if we get that, that'll help a lot of student athletes get more funding, be able to pay for things, stuff like that. So it's changed the recruiting aspect in a bunch of different ways. Not only the scholarships going up, but the rosters going down. You're no longer building rosters for necessarily the future. You're building it 1 year at a time. So we're in an age of, transfer portal, NIL. It's just, a lot of moving parts that you just got to stay flexible, especially in the coaching industry.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like before the portal and NIL and all this stuff, and now with the increased roster size or the decreased roster size, higher scholarship numbers people are allowed to do. You used to be building a roster for the future, right? You'd bring in freshmen and think he may not play his freshman year, but sophomore year or junior year, he could be a guy for us. Safe to say you're not really thinking like that anymore, Zeke?
Without a doubt. Obviously you still want to recruit young guys and have a foundation. Now that foundation for us is mostly just, you want to find good arms and develop them. We're very fortunate here at Kent State to have a really good pitching coach in Mike Birkbeck. He's been a staple here since 2004. We've won a lot of games, and we don't win that without really good pitching. So we feel like we have a really good system for developing young arms. So therefore, in the 26th class so far, we already have 3 guys committed that are pitchers, 2 lefties and a righty. So, we're being very strategic on how we're going about recruiting young guys. It's no longer, let's just add 10 young guys and develop them when they get here. It's like, no, what do we really need when that time comes? Obviously, we're really going to need pitching. We're going to need guys that are athletic, that can play the middle of the field and things like that. So you're looking at it at a completely different landscape than in years past, where it's like, oh, this kid's pretty good. He's from Ohio. Let's add this kid. That's not really the case anymore.
Okay. And I don't like the more I've been thinking about it, you're down to 34 roster spots. Is 17, if your school can get to 17 scholarships where you can give essentially, depending on how you spread it out, but you could potentially give every kid a 50% scholarship athletically. And then with academic, a lot of kids probably can get close to almost 100% stuff paid for.
Mm-hmm.
At least for the mid-major level, is that kind of the gold standard? You get to 17, obviously you get as much as you can, but if you can get to 17, you can compete with pretty much anybody.
Absolutely. I think you said right there, just get to as much as you can. I think if you're able to get to a number around 17, 18, you're going to put yourself in a really good spot. And if you're at a school that can, stack that money, you're in a really, really, really good spot. So like I said earlier, it's just a lot of moving parts, and you just got to stay flexible because each year is bringing something different. It's the 40 to 34, 18 scholarships. Well, if we have 18 scholarships for a year, 17 scholarships for a year, are we going to have that next year? Is it going to change? It's just, you just got to stay flexible.
Yeah. So, a lot of the stuff that I talk about, Zeke, and we'll get to some questions here in a little bit. A lot of the stuff I've been saying recently is recruiting is just, I think the best thing I read was it's decades worth of changes in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So a lot of it is you guys that are in the recruiting world I mean, you're trying to react, and then you're kind of waiting as well to like, all right, well, what are they going to come up with next? And we know with a lot of these changes, we're not going to hear fine print until maybe March or April. But about this new roster set date for next year on December 1st, what were your first kind of reactions to that when it came out?
It gives you more clarity on what's coming. You as a recruiting coordinator, you're kind of worried because it's like, do we have to be at 34 on August 1st or first day of class, or do now we have clarity that we have to be at 34 on December 1st? So it kind of gives you more an idea on planning, on what you can add and what you can't add. So that's nice. But the thing is still scary, man. Like, you get to 34 on December 1st and you're in scrimmages in early February and you got a guy that blows out. And now I'm starting the season with 33 guys. That doesn't make much sense to me. And I think that puts a lot of programs at a massive disadvantage. As you've been in college baseball a while, I've been in college baseball a while. Injuries happen. It's part of the game.
Yeah. And one happening in this early spring, that's like best case scenario, right? Like
exactly.
It could be worst case scenario. You get 5 guys go down, and then what do you do?
Exactly. It's not like the minor leagues where you can't just go down to AAA or AA and pick up a guy. It's not like that. So I think that, we got to come up with a better system for the future. And, I don't know what that looks like or what it's going to entail, but, you're just putting a lot of people at risk by having that 34 drop dead date at December 1st, because, obviously with injuries, and the most common type of injuries you're going to get is on the pitching side of things, because it's just how it is.
100%.
You lose a weekend guy preseason, you're probably going to lose other guys. Other guys are going to have to pick up the slack. There's not enough guys and not enough innings to go around. So, it's just a lot of moving parts, like we said, and you said it best right there. Decades worth of change in 1 year. You got a lot dropped on us recently.
Yeah.
You just, like I said, you just got to stay transparent. You got to stay flexible, and you just got to be prepared for anything.
Okay. So, Zeke, another question here from Charles Parrish. Coach, do mid-majors start making offers August 1st to rising 11th graders, or do you wait for the Power 4 schools and then start making offers end of year going into the new year?
Yeah, great question. We operate on our own timetable here at Kent State. I can't speak for other schools, but, if we like a guy and we've evaluated him and we've talked with the travel coach, the high school coach, and we know that he's a fit for our program, once August 1st hits, we're ready to go. We'll offer that kid and get him on a visit and hopefully lock him down. But, we operate on our own timetable. We don't worry about what other people are doing or anything of that nature.
Do you think, Zeke, that because of the roster size change, I mean, obviously at Kent State, it's, for those who don't know, I mean, it's one of the best mid-majors in the country, certainly in the Midwest. You guys play for the conference championship almost every year. You get into the tournament all the time. Do you feel like you're going to start to get maybe a little bit more talented players because there are less roster spots to go around at the Power 4?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously with the rosters going from 40 to 34, there's not enough roster spots to go around. So I would say patience is key in that aspect. Obviously we're still going to do our due diligence and go out and watch games and evaluate and build those relationships with travel coaches and high school coaches and find out what guys are fit for our program. But there are still going to be players out there that are really good players that, would normally be committed on August 1st that are uncommitted on December 1st. Just a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of really good players out there right now that are still uncommitted, and we're nowhere near close to being done with our 26th class, as we're taking it slow. But like you said, yeah, there's going to be a lot of really good players out there available, where in years past, 3 years ago, those guys have been gobbled up August 1st and already committed.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to another question Kane's had. So in 2025, I'm guessing you guys will be going hard in the portal because he recognized you'd only have 3 high school commits in the 26th class right now. Mm-hmm. So is it the case that you're just going to go to the portal hard, or you're, like you said, you're taking it slow, you're still going to pick up a good number of high school guys?
Well, I think he might have been looking up on Perfect Game. I think Perfect Game shows us only having 3 commits, but
I say that all the time. Hey, don't trust the Perfect Game prep baseball stuff.
We currently have 6 guys committed / signed in the 25 class. So, we're taking it step by step. We're going to see what happens with the draft. And, we got an older squad this year, so we'll have some guys run out of eligibility. But, we're expecting those 6 guys to come in next year and be able to compete for a spot right away. One of the great things about our program we take a lot of pride in is we don't over-recruit. we're allowed to have 40 guys on our roster this year, and a lot of people will have a bunch more guys on the roster in the fall. We have 40 guys in the fall, and we'll have 40 guys in the spring. We don't over recruit, so we take a lot of pride in that.
Awesome. Yeah. So Charles said, obviously, thanks for responding. Another question here from Craig Sisson. How many pitchers, and I think this is with the 34-man roster, so for next year, and this is something I've tried to figure out, because you're going to have a balance, Zeke. Obviously, as you and I know, with the way the ball's traveling in college baseball, these games aren't 2-1 games anymore. I mean, it's an 8-7 game on Friday. It's a 12-10 game on Saturday. You need as many arms you can get. Do you have any idea kind of what the spread for you guys is going to be with how many pitchers you carry in the season versus how many position players? And when you travel, what's that going to look like?
That's a great question. And I think as a coaching staff, we don't even have an answer for that yet. That goes back and forth in our meetings for well, is it going to be 17-17? Is it going to be 18-16? What's it going to be? I think that puts a more of a value on two-way guys. You know what I'm saying? So you want a guy that can do both sides of the baseball, and that just brings immense value to those guys. And that goes back to the recruiting piece in 26 and being very strategic on what you add. You want to add guys that are a good fit for your program, but with the rosters going from 40 to 34, you need guys that can do both because there are so few roster spots. So to answer your question on what we're going to do, we're not sure yet. We'll cross that bridge when it gets there, but it's going to look probably something like, the more pitching you have, the better.
Yeah, and you got a year and a couple months to finalize that decision. Yep. Zeke, it's hilarious because I've what you just said, I've been saying for the last couple months after these changes, like two-way guys, again, they have to be legit, right? You're not just always, he's not very good on the mound, but he can pitch, so we're going to take him. Yeah. You got to be legit on both sides, but you're way more valuable now if you're a legit two-way guy, or like you said, if you're on the road and you're going to bring, let's say you're going to bring 18 arms and 16 position players, or 19 arms and 15 position players. Your position players, you're going to value guys that can play all over the field now, right?
Absolutely, without a doubt. One of the things that we like here at Kent State, especially from a recruiting perspective, is we like athletes. We like guys that are very versatile and can play a bunch of different positions. So that puts more of an emphasis on recruiting position player-wise, guys that just play the middle of the field. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, you got to have a guy that's behind the plate that can command the pitching staff and lead the pitching staff, but usually when you get a shortstop, that guy can probably play second base. He can probably play third base. Pretty good chance he can scoop the ball over at first base. And if you get a center fielder, I mean, Kyle, you're an outfielder, yourself. You get a center fielder.
I wish I was right-handed, man. Golly.
That guy could play corners of the outfield. So that's a very big emphasis on recruiting guys that are versatile, because with the limited roster spots, man, you just don't know what's going to rise up.
Yeah. And like if you're a high school kid out there watching, or a parent, and your son's a shortstop, or your son's a, whatever position, dude, if you're an infielder, start taking fly balls in the outfield. If you're an outfielder and you're right-handed, unfortunately for me, my dad, I think, wanted a left-handed pitcher and made me left-handed. I couldn't play infield. And, if you're an outfielder, take ground balls in the infield, like make yourself as versatile as possible. Cause like Zeke's saying, you got smaller roster now. You can't afford to bring in like 3 first basemen anymore. Mm-hmm. You can't bring in 3 third basemen anymore. You got to bring in up the middle players, which has kind of always been the model, right? Yep. But sometimes you can't get them. Now it's like you got to value those guys.
Absolutely. We committed a kid in the 26 class that came to camp back in November. It was a kid that plays for the GRB Rays, a really good program out of Wisconsin. And, we've heard a lot about him, a lot of really good things. Well, he came to our camp and ran a 6.6 60, was behind the plate, throwing lasers to second base, took reps at shortstop, then took reps at center field, and was hitting balls out left and right at our ballpark. And we're like, this is a no-brainer. But it lines up to what we're looking to add when he gets here in 26, which is guys that are versatile, guys that can play all around the field, which I think he profiles as a catcher. And me being a catcher,
you would say that, you would say that.
Very upset if he gets moved to shortstop or center field with his skill set behind the plate. But he's so versatile, it allows us to have freedom to do other things.
Yeah, like if you have a catcher that maybe you think is not as good of a bat, but he's probably as good defensively, and then you have this guy who can play all over the field. All right, we'll put him in center, we'll put him at short or second or whatever. Yep. So another question from Canes: will Kent State hold some spots in 2025 for Power 4 kids that get cut next year when the roster limits are set? Power 4 kids, incoming freshmen, or veterans who get cut?
So to my point earlier, we're building rosters for 1 year at a time. So once this summer hits, after our season it gets done, hopefully it gets done in the postseason, we'll evaluate what we need, and what we need will be active in the portal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I think a lot of people think, well, again, it's baseball, guys. Like it's more like college basketball than college football. Like mid majors are way better in baseball than they are obviously in football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see it every year in the NCAA tournament. Mid majors coming in and taking out big SEC or ACC programs. But you guys aren't just going to go after a kid because he's from Power Four. It's only if it's going to match a need that you guys are looking for the next year, right?
Without a doubt. Like I said earlier, we take a lot of pride not over recruiting. You know, if we get a kid that had a pretty good season, say he hit 280 with 6 home runs, and we think he's going to be a really good player, and there's a guy in the portal that hit 320 with 10, and we can get him, probably not going to do it. You know, we like to stick by our guys, and we're only going to add on a need basis. So we'll be active just like everybody else is in college baseball. It seems to be the norm. If you're not active in college baseball in the portal, you're probably a pretty good chance you're going to get left behind.
100%.
So we'll be active in the portal, but only on a need to get basis.
Okay. So another question from Charles Parrish. How do you identify potential recruits? Do you go around to tournaments, watch high school games, et cetera? What's the best thing a 10th grader can do besides working out, lifting, et cetera?
Yeah, great question. You know, we go to all the tournaments that you go to in Atlanta, the Perfect Game tournaments, the PBR tournaments. Our coaching staff goes to all the tournaments up here in Ohio. And I would say one of the best things that a rising 10th grader can do is just play the game. You know, you only are going to get better by playing the game and learning from your success and learning from your mistakes. And, you know, don't get too caught up in what's going on Instagram and Twitter. And, you know what works for you. I would say you're probably a pretty good player if you know what works for you to work on what works best for you, if that makes sense. You know, you got so many guys that, they can throw 90 miles an hour and they have a pretty good breaking ball, but they're trying to, work on their induced vertical break or their horizontal break or stuff like that. Do what works best for you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you agree with that, Kyle.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like baseball is such an individual sport. Like if you're a lineman in football, like there's blocking technique that you have to know, right? And everybody's got to do it pretty much the same. But in baseball, if you're a hitter, certain drills are going to work for you, but certain drills, if you do them, are going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So don't just copy what you see a big leaguer doing. Do some research, know how your swing works. It's kind of hard to do, and you have to have someone around you that you can trust that kind of has an idea of what they're talking about.
Yep.
But 100%. So another question here from John: are they now recruiting high school players with the view of, can this kid help us freshman year?
100%. Unfortunately, the day and age of adding a kid that, maybe a walk-on type kid that's going to develop and be ready to go by his junior, senior year is probably out the door. There's a lot of really good players out there that are really good in college baseball. And, I'll bring up this kid's name because I coached him at Georgia Tech, and you know him very well, Kyle. John Giesler. John Giesler's a kid at Georgia Tech that both of us coached that was a type of kid that went in there and was going to develop, and now he's one of the best hitters in the ACC. Unfortunately, those type of guys are no longer going to programs like that because you're building rosters for a year.
Yep.
So the day and age of adding a guy and developing him, like, all right, by the time this guy's a junior, he should be able to compete for us. That's probably just out the door, unfortunately, which is sad to say because those type of guys you pull for and you really want to help develop, but you're building rosters on a year-to-year basis, unfortunately.
And it helps that, and you and I both know this, Zeke, because obviously, like you said, we both coached him. We both loved coaching him because he was one of, if not the hardest workers on the team, right? And he knew for probably a couple of years, I don't got a shot at making the starting lineup, and he kept working. And like you said, now he's one of the best hitters in the ACC.
Yeah, without a doubt. He just put his head down and went to work. And not only that, it goes back to the versatility point. He knew he wasn't going to crack the field at first base because we had Andrew Jenkins.
Yep.
He knew his best chance was to crack the field behind the plate. And I was the catching coach. He started working on catching and got pretty serviceable at it. He took reps at third base. He took reps at second base. He just found a way to get on the field.
And you got to really want it to volunteer to try to learn to catch, right?
Without a doubt.
You got to really want it.
Those guys get thumbed one time and they're done.
Yeah.
With it.
100%. So I think another question here from BA: if a high school player attends a school because he was recruited by the baseball team, he can make all the arrangements, financial, logistics, et cetera, and then be told December 1st he didn't make the team?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's usually how it works. Yeah, unfortunately.
And with that new rule date, right, that's 100%, guys. And, I got a video that's going to be coming out maybe next week, but talking about that's why it's so important. And Zeke, you can kind of echo this. It's so important to pick a school where you really get the feeling that you're going to get a shot to play for a spot as a freshman. Because if there's no spot available and you're committing and the roster makeup doesn't make sense, like you better ball out your freshman fall or there's a chance you're gone.
Yeah, absolutely. The fit is so important. Obviously, you and I both went to ACC schools, and everybody gets clouded with the opportunity to go play at a SEC school or an ACC school or a Power 4 school. But you got to think those schools are the schools that have the most NIL money. Those schools are recruiting strictly pretty much from the portal, and they're adding guys that have had a lot of success at the mid-major and even Power 4 level, taking guys from other guys.
Yep.
You're going to go to a spot that you're going to be able to not only, one, have an opportunity to earn a spot to play, but develop as well. So you got to find a place that fits you, and not just that, you got to find a coaching staff that fits your personality. And you don't know that until you've been coached a bunch of different ways.
Yep.
Might not gel well with my personality or someone else's personality. You got to do your research and make sure you talk to guys that have played in those programs and things like that, and find a program that really fits you on all different aspects. Not even that, you got to find a school that, you can get the education that you want, the city, you enjoy living in the city. I can't begin to tell you how many times that I've heard the story of, oh man, the school was awesome, but I just hated living there. You got to do your research at this point, especially when you're a young kid. It's the biggest decision at that point you're ever going to make in your life. And a lot of kids make it too quickly.
Another point here from BA on the flip side of that, I think he's insinuating this could be in the future be the case. I'd think that there'd be some families that would not commit if they don't have enough security that they'll be on the team. So Zeke, looking at it, and again, I think this benefits Kent State and mid-majors like you guys, because if you're looking at a Power 4 offer and you're thinking, yeah, it's a pretty good offer, but they brought in 15 guys in the portal last spring or last summer, like how do I know? It may even, and this is what I tell parents all the time now, you can't even really look at roster makeup anymore when making a decision, because it could look like, oh man, there's 2 spots for me to compete for. And then 2 weeks before you get on campus, 5 portal guys show up and those spots are taken, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to the point, you're building rosters for 1 year. It's, can this guy help me this year get to an NCAA tournament? And unfortunately, just the way it works in college baseball, not just college baseball, but college basketball, college football, and all the college sports, older wins. Usually when guys have more experience at that level, they tend to have more success. It's just, an 18-year-old playing against a 22-year-old. That 22-year-old's had 4 years in a weight room with a college strength coach. He's had 4 years of instruction with the college coach. And he's had 4 years of experience in playing in those type of environments.
100%.
There's just a bunch of, different ways you can skin a cat, right?
Yep.
Well, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it when you're older.
100%. So another question from Canes. Question to Coach. What are your thoughts on coaches recruiting and flipping committed players? I personally don't have an issue with it when that's kind of the game now.
It's just part of the game. It's just
you don't like it though. I know you don't like it though.
I don't like it, no, but it is what it is. It tends to be usually when you have a lot of success, you're able to do it, and it is what it is. It's part of the game. It's
kind of one of those things, Zeke, that I think 5 or 6 or maybe 10 years ago, you did that stuff. Like, maybe there'd be a fight maybe out at a summer ball game. It was that looked down upon. But with NIL now and the portal and how little loyalty there is now amongst players between colleges and, both ways, it's kind of like not as big of a deal now, right? Like you don't like it, and especially when it happens to you, like you lose one of your guys, you're not going to be happy about it. But it's kind of like the way it's going now.
Yeah, I would say like this. I don't think no matter what, you're going to like it. I think it's going to probably cause problems in some capacity. People handle things in different ways. It's still, I still look at it as very frowned upon.
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
Yeah,
but it's a part of our game, and like I said, you got to be transparent in our game. Just like the transfer portal, NIL, you got to adapt. If you don't adapt, you're going to get left behind. And that's just unfortunately one of the things that's adapting in our game is people flipping commits. And, if you get a kid taken from you, you better get your butt out there and find a new guy, just how it is.
That's 100%. So from John, does the legit two-way guy have more value for them now with a smaller roster? And what about an athlete that can play multiple positions well? I think we covered it already, but Zeke, you can go ahead and answer it again.
Yeah, absolutely. With the rosters going from 40 to 34, you definitely want to have guys that can do both sides of the baseball because you just don't know how many pitchers you want to carry, position players you want to carry. Just guys that can do both. And if you got a guy that's a two-way guy and he can pitch and he can play all over the diamond, that guy's probably going to make a lot of money in college baseball, just being honest, with the rosters going from
Yeah.
40 to 34.
100%. And like, I always qualify it with, because I have put videos out talking about this very thing. Like, more versatile you are now, you're more valuable. If you're a legit two-way guy, you're way more valuable. But the qualifier is like, you got to be legit, right? You can't. It's not like you're a center fielder and like you've taken ground balls at shortstop before.
Yeah.
Like, you got to look the part there, or at least maybe not shortstop, but second and third. You look the part. You're way more valuable now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things, obviously, Zeke, like every school recruits a little bit differently. You want obviously to get as many and as big talent players as you can. Is there something that you guys at Kent State, as far as on the pitching side and on the hitting side, that maybe something unique about what you're looking for versus other schools?
Yeah, so I'd say on the pitching side of things, man, we like guys that obviously are projectable. You want guys that when they get in here, they're going to continue to develop, not just as from an ability perspective, but from physically as well. You want guys to keep making those adjustments. But early on, man, you got to be able to throw strikes, plain and simple. You got to be able to throw strikes, not just that, probably 2 pitches for strikes.
Yep.
It's hard to get a guy in here that, he might throw really hard, but the off speed's not great and he's pretty erratic. That guy's probably not going to be a fit for us. So what we look for on the pitching side of things is 2 pitches for strikes and then projectability. And as I stated earlier, I feel like we have one of the best pitching coaches in college baseball, and a guy that has a lot of success developing pitchers. Is since 2004, we've had 44 pitchers drafted. 9 of those guys have made big league appearances, and 3 of those guys have pitched in the big leagues. I'm sorry, other way around. 9 big leaguers, 3 first rounders. So we got a guy that can develop pitching and do that at a high level. So those are the things we look for on the pitching side of things. And then on the offensive side of things, we really like guys that are athletic, guys that can not only move the baseball and hit the baseball, but guys that play fast. We're a program that takes a lot of pride in stealing bases and putting a lot of pressure on the defense. So don't get me wrong, we like to hit home runs and hit the ball over the field, but we want to put pressure on the defense. And we feel one of the ways you do that is through the bases. So we really like adding guys that are athletic, guys that have played multiple sports, and guys that are versatile. So athletic guys that will, just like on the pitching side of things, will continue to develop not only as a player but physically as well. As we take a lot of pride in having a really physical team. We have a really big team this year. So those are 2 things that we look for, just not only on the pitching side of things but the hitting side of things as well.
Great points. And again, I think everyone just assumes that, well, if a school, like let's say in your conference, Zeke, offers a kid, then you guys are probably going to offer him too, or you're going to like him. The reality is that you may think, that they offered that kid, we don't like him at all. Mm-hmm. It's just recruiting is so much different, and it's such a subjective thing at the end of the day. So from Bill Wallace here, do you have suggestions for high school players and parents, the best approach to asking about playing time, the portal, and being the right fit without coming off arrogant or uncoachable? So when they're talking to a college coach, how do they ask about this stuff now without coming off like, oh gosh, are these guys going to be a problem to deal with when they get here?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me personally, I can speak from my experiences. I would like it if you're just frankly honest and just ask that question point blank. I think you're going to be able to pick up right away which guys are going to be serious with you and which guys are going to beat around the bush. I think just the more clear you can be and the more clarity you can provide, you'll receive the more clarity on your answers. And just do your research. Just look at the programs that years before and see what they've done. Because traditionally, if they did something one year and they had a lot of success with it, they're probably going to follow up with it and things like that. So I would say just ask those questions and try to get as much clarity as you can, but be very clear in what you're asking as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, Bill, I mean, you can ask the question and be like, hey, listen, we know the situation now. We know how everything's going. Like, we're just trying to do our due diligence, right? And most coaches that's not going to scare them off. Now, some of them may, like you said, Zeke, they may kind of beat around the bush and kind of like give you a non-answer.
Yeah.
But you're not going to scare a coach off by asking questions like that, especially with the environment now. So from Canes, question to coach at GT and now, do you allow your incoming freshmen to play summer ball so the kids can come into fall with the same amount of reps as the veterans who are playing in the Cape, Northwoods, New England League, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an invaluable experience that you can have if you get done with your senior year, go pitch in a summer league, play in a summer league, get those at bats. Playing against any college competition will help you when you get here for the fall, because you see a lot of kids come in for the first freshman fall and they struggle big time just because the competition level is so much of a difference. As you're 18 years old, you might think you're a man, but you're not a man yet. You get here, you're playing against men. So I think that's just an invaluable experience, and absolutely. And especially on like when you get here after your freshman year, we send all our guys out to go play summer ball. We think that experience is not only great for you as a person, but to get those reps, that's truly the best way to develop.
100%. And I think Canes is kind of speaking to, obviously, Zeke, like there are a lot of programs out there now that are bringing in freshmen, for that July semester to get them acclimated, to get them on campus, get them working with the strength coach. There's probably some positives to that, but do you think it's better to play summer ball or move in early like that? Which one do you think is probably better?
I would say go play summer ball, because at
Yep.
the end of the day, you're coming to this school to play baseball. You get kids that want to go move in because they want to go get the college experience and go out and have a good time. But the guys that go out and they play in those summer balls and summer ball leagues and they get ready and they prepare, usually those guys come in and have an opportunity to compete at a high level in the fall right away.
Yeah. And, so talk about Zeke. Again, this is something I've talked about a bunch, but just how big of an adjustment coming from high school to those freshman, not only practices, but inter squads when you're facing, like you said, it's the best talent you're going to face ever. A lot of high school kids think, most of the guys they're facing in travel ball are throwing like 82, 83. And, the kids are like, yeah, this guy throws 88. And you're sitting back there and you're like, no, he's throwing like low 80s. And so they think they're like, oh, yeah, I face that all the time in travel ball. But they get to campus and it's like, oh, this guy sits 90? He doesn't just hit 90 like once on a pull down? How big is that adjustment from a high school senior to freshman fall?
It's day and night. I can give you an example just from my playing career. I missed my senior year of high school because I had Tommy John surgery. So I only got to play like 5 games my senior year. I missed the entire freshman fall, and I started playing in scrimmages my freshman spring. And that freshman spring 2016 Louisville team, we ended up getting beat in a super regional, but that team had close to 10 big leaguers on it. And my first 3 at-bats, my first at-bat was against Brendan McKay, who's one of the best two-way players to ever play college baseball.
Yep.
My second at-bat was against a kid named Lincoln Hinsman, who ended up being the closer of the year the next year. And then my third at-bat was against Zach Birdie, who's a big leaguer. So I faced 2 big leaguers in a closer of the year in my first 3 at-bats. And I think I actually got lucky and got 2 hits. But I remember sitting there facing those guys and being like, I've never faced this before in my entire life.
100%. And I can give, my experience of that too. At Georgia Tech, I come in, the year prior, they were the number 1 team in the country. The Friday guy that I had to face in inter squads was Mark Pope, 4th round pick, pitched all the way up to AAA. Saturday guy was Jed Bradley, 15th overall pitched in the big leagues. Sunday guy was Buck Farmer, who has pitched in the big leagues for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And our closer was Luke Bard, who was a first rounder and also pitched in the big leagues. And then you talk about the freshmen in your class that go on to play pro ball and the sophomores. And so what you realize, guys, in college baseball is that you're not just playing like the high school guy that throws 88. You're facing guys that end up going on to play professional baseball. And so that freshman fall, if you guys are not playing summer ball, you're in for a rude awakening because you're playing catch up, trying to get acclimated like we all do when we're back swinging the bat. So might as well put yourself in the best possible situation by being ready when you get on campus, right, Zeke?
Absolutely. Not only are you facing guys that you've never faced before, but you're handling adversity probably for the first time in your life. So it's going to be one of the first times in that student athlete's life that you haven't had success every time you step on the field. And there's going to probably be weeks where you're out getting a hit. And you want to talk about the lowest of lows. That'll get you there real quick.
100%. I think a big thing that people don't really get, Zeke, is when you get to college baseball, winning is number 1, right? You're like you said, you're trying to develop. You're going to develop guys as much as you can, but you're putting the winning team on the field. You're not playing favorites. You're not benching this guy because you don't like him. Me and you both have been there. We've had guys in the lineup where we're like, golly, I do not like this guy, but man, he's the best we got. Like he's got to be in the lineup, right? It's about winning over anything else, right?
Absolutely. I think I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that our coaching staff talks about a lot here. There's just not enough emphasis on the summer ball games, the travel ball games, on winning. You just don't find many kids nowadays that know how to win. And that at the end of the day, that's what you come here to do in college baseball. You got to win. You want to have the best experience that you've had in sports, you got to win. I think about, I played with really good players and was fortunate to be at Louisville at a really good time. I think about playing in the College World Series. I don't think about getting 2 hits against a team or having career best games. I don't think about that. I think about my experience in Omaha. That's what I think about when I think about my college baseball career, and you don't get there without winning. So winning is a habit. Winning is something that doesn't just come lightly. You got to do it every single day. And I just don't think there's enough emphasis on that. There's a lot of emphasis on me. What can I do, or what's in it for me, instead of being like, all right, what do I got to do to help us win? Because that's the most important thing, is winning. So I'm glad you brought that up, Kyle.
100%. Hey, we get it, dude. You played in the College World Series twice, all right? I brought it. I already said it. You don't need to tell him again, okay? Jeez, this guy always talks about the College World Series. No, I think back to some of these changes, Zeke, and you brought up a good point, and then there was a lot of questions. So I want to circle back. You brought up the fact that with the 34-man roster having to be set on December 1st, like what happens if and we've probably both played on teams where all of a sudden like 4 or 5 guys go down. Me in particular in 2012, we had projected to be a really good team, and we lost like 7 pitchers and a couple of our weekend starters, a couple of our, Luke Bard, the guy I brought up who ended up being a first round pick, and he pitched like the first third of the season and then he was out. And so what do you think the NCAA is going to have to do to help out teams with that? Because they have said they're not going to allow JV teams, but let's say, okay, you cut 5 guys, or, you cut 8 or 6 down from 40. Like you guys said, you bring in 40, who knows how many you'll bring in for this next year, but you go from 40 to 34. Do you like have those 6 guys if they don't go in the portal, which, how do you stop them from doing that once they're cut? But do you say, hey, the club team, like, hey, go play on the club team, get some at bats, get some innings in and if guys get hurt, like we're gonna call you up to the big squad. Like, how is that gonna work now?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and the NCAA needs to provide us more clarity on what that's gonna look like. But I would find it very offensive if I was one of those players in their shoes and they're like, hey, you need to go keep getting reps in the club team. I would be like, no, thank you. So it's going to be interesting to see how the NCAA gets to this, whatever they decide to do. But, the first thing that came to my mind when you said that is you're probably going to have open tryouts on the mound if you get pitchers go down. You're going to more position players throwing that have a good arm, and that's going to be scary to think about, but there's no other alternative. If you get guys that go down and you don't have any pitching, you're in trouble, point blank. So there's got to be a better alternative for what this is going to look like. If you get guys that go down, you should be able to take a guy that wasn't fortunate enough to make the roster, like, hey, now you're on the roster, now you can contribute. There's got to be a better way, because people are going to be in trouble, because injuries is just
100%.
It's going to happen. It's inevitable. It's going to happen for the remainder of the history of sports. People are going to get hurt. So how can we prepare by doing that, by having guys ready that aren't on the roster? So we got to figure out a way. I don't know what that looks like. That's for people that, are way higher up than me. But, usually college baseball gets it right, and I hope we really get this right.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've been talking about for like the last couple months is it's not even about, okay, you're down to 34, which, again, you lose out on a few pitchers, and all of a sudden, and again, like, I think some people think, well, it's a 3-game weekend. Like, how many pitchers do you really need? Again, guys, like these games are like 10-9 games. You're throwing a lot of pitches in these games. And not to mention when you get to the conference tournament or you get to a regional and you're in game 5 and everybody's thrown twice already. And Zeke, in those game 5s in the regional, or like you go deep in the tournament, like guys that have 3 innings on the year, hey, you're in there. Like, look, hey, no one else is fresh. We got to throw you. So it's not just about the injuries, like you said, but how do you, if you have some guys in reserves, like maybe you have 6 extra guys that are on your team still, but they're just not on the roster. And then how do you keep them fresh? Are they still allowed to practice with your team? I just don't see them. There's any way they cannot do that.
Exactly. I agree. You got to be able to, like, say there are 6 guys that didn't make the roster. Okay, let's redshirt those 6 guys. You're able to practice with the team. You just can't travel and play in games.
Yep.
That's the way I look at it. That's the only way to be able to keep these guys ready and to be able to, keep these guys ready to go into the game. You know what I'm saying? So, like, this guys that go down, hey, this guy can come in and play. He's been practicing with us. He can't travel with us, but, essentially he's on the team, but he's on the team. I honestly don't know how it's going to work.
And you think about it, like, and you could make the rule to where so people aren't just saying, oh, well, this guy hasn't played well for 3 weeks, so we're going to bring up another guy. Like, there has to be an injury, right? And then maybe it has to be like an injury where he's going to miss at least a couple weeks, and then it's going to be like the DL. What I foresee happening, it's going to be like the DL in the big leagues, right? It's like, oh, he's on the 15-day. So if you announce that, the guy has to be off the team for 15 days, or at least off the roster. Another guy can take his spot. Because I'm sitting there and people really aren't talking about it. But like, if you don't have that option, first off, if you cut 6 guys from 40 to 34, how the hell do you keep guys from not going in the portal? Exactly. Right? You just cut them from your roster, and you're going to hope that you say, hey, well, you can be on the extra 6 guys where if guys get hurt, you'll be on the roster. It's like a lot of people probably aren't going to like that option. Mm-hmm. And so then, like you said, all of a sudden you're having open tryouts, having guys from campus, guys from the frats show up on the field and try to make the team. Yeah. And if you're not allowed to have, let's say you do keep 6 guys and they're not allowed to practice with your team, he hasn't picked up a ball in 2 months, and then you're like, hey, it's your turn, get in. Like, you're pitching this weekend. Like, again, it doesn't make sense, but here's from Canes. Or we do it like the old days, and we can take players from JUCOs like the 80s. Miami would take guys from Miami-Dade when they had 4 different teams. I don't think that's going to happen, Canes. I don't think that's going to happen. So, Zeke, like, obviously, this is your first role as a recruiting coordinator. You were an assistant coach. When the third assistant coach was made a rule, that was your role at Georgia Tech. Before that, you were the volunteer, and then you were grad assistant at Louisville. What are the differences in your responsibilities now from the third assistant coach to now being the recruiting coordinator?
Yeah, so fortunately for me, as 4 years at Georgia Tech, I was able to work with James Ramsey, who's a great recruiting coordinator and hitting coach at Georgia Tech. And, he prepped me for a lot of what I'm doing. Yeah. Obviously, he had the title of recruiting coordinator, and he made all the decisions on who got recruited and stuff like that. But he had me go out and evaluate, and I was very fortunate for him to, like my opinion on when I saw guys like, hey, this guy can really play, and that was nice. But he prepped me for this, man. He kind of would sit me down and explain things to me, and it was a lot of trial and error too. I would go out and be able to go recruiting, and go to the wrong field and be like, oh crap, I'm at the wrong field. I got to figure it out. So that's a big part. But the recruiting falls on me, and recruiting coordinator, it's a title, but that's kind of really all it is. It's a joint effort. Every coach in this coaching staff plays a big role in our program on the recruiting side of things. Everybody's getting names. Everybody's going and watching players. Everybody's talking to players on the phone. So the recruiting title is a nice title. It sounds good, but a good recruiting coordinator is only as good as the staff with them, in my opinion. You got to have guys that, can go out there and watch games and talk to guys on the phone, because you can't be everywhere at once. You can't talk to every recruit. You got to be able to delegate. And that's one thing that I've learned from great recruiting coordinators. I've been around Ramsey. I've been around Eric Snyder at Louisville. Both those guys know how to delegate and use the people around them, and they build relationships. Those are the biggest things in being a recruiting coordinator.
Yeah, and again, like we all kind of have the things in evaluation that we really feel like we know what we're looking at. We know we can evaluate this. We also have, holes where you may think, you want a second opinion on a guy. Like, for you, for example, you're kind of in a unique position because you were a catcher. Mm-hmm. So you were a hitter, but you also got to see pitching. You were the one catching the pitches.
Yep.
So you're probably in a unique situation because, you're catching pitchers all the time. So you have an idea of kind of what works and what doesn't and what it should look like. And then you were a hitter as well, so know what you're looking at there. But certainly, a guy like James, one of the best hitting coaches in the country, obviously has done a heck of a job recruiting with the ranks of his recruiting classes at Georgia Tech. But he wasn't a pitcher, right? Mm-hmm. He wasn't a catcher. So guys are going to have to depend on the pitching coach or the hitting coach for that second opinion of like, hey, I think this guy's good, but what do you think?
Yeah, my catching background I think helps me a lot, especially in the recruiting side of things. And I tell people all the time, one of my favorite things to recruit is pitchers. I love watching people throw because I can just look at it through a different lens. I can look at it and be like, all right, I've caught a guy like this. He reminds me of this. Oh, that guy, that guy wasn't very good. Or this guy reminds me of this. This guy was really good. We need this guy. Things like that. So I think my catching background helps me a lot. To your point, I've caught a lot of really good pitchers, and I was able to, hit at the ACC level. So I see both sides of the baseball. And not just that, the style of play that we play here at Kent State really matches the style of play that I played in at Louisville. So it lines up really well. And I was very fortunate to be at Georgia Tech because Georgia Tech plays a completely different style of baseball than what I was used to at Louisville and what we do here at Kent. It's about hitting the ball out of the yard, hitting the ball out of the yard and striking dudes out. So I was able to get different perspectives on how to recruit different things. So I've been very fortunate in that.
Awesome. So we're going to do a few more questions because Zeke, I know you got to go here soon, but from Canes, as a recruiting coordinator, are you the one that brings the film and names to coaches and you give your opinion and they give the okay and then continued, or is it a joint effort, like you said, where the pitching coach will show you a player you've never seen and you'll show him a player and he has never seen, and then you converse and talk about him?
Yeah, I say it's a little bit of both. I think it's mostly my responsibility to gather the names and talk to travel coaches and high school coaches and stay up to date with the PBR and the perfect game stuff and see, who's buzzing, which guy's name's got a lot of buzz around it and stuff like that. And then we'll collab as a coaching staff. We don't make any decisions without all of us giving the okay. All of our opinions and evaluations are important. So I'd say it's a lot of collaboration on what this guy looks like. And, three of us could say, hey, I really like this guy. And one guy like, oh, I don't know. We all got to agree. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, and I think one question I think is really important. Obviously, Zeke, now even before there were less roster spots, with the addition of the portal, less high schoolers are getting recruited. Right, you're no longer bringing in. Let's say you need to bring in 12 guys. You're not bringing in 12 high schoolers. You're maybe bringing in half that as high school and half that a portal, or somewhere around that.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it a little bit, but for the high school players out there, what do they need to do to separate themselves and be able to compete not only against their peers, but against those guys that are in the portal and have the experience and the at-bats under their belt?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say one thing that you can do to separate yourself is, I'd say, by the way you handle yourself and the way you play the game. You see a lot of guys that are playing now and they're looking for clout. You get the sliding pad in the back pocket, the towel in the back pocket, the chains, the whole 9 yards. No one really cares about that stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're going to see guys that play the game the right way. A guy that plays hard, how he interacts with the umpires, how he interacts with his coaches, his teammates, guys that play professional. Because at the end of the day, that's what the goal is, right? You want to play professional baseball. So we want to bring guys into this program that have aspirations not only to win, but to play professionally. So guys that can handle themselves at a young age, at 16, 17 years old, that already know how to play professionally, I think you can separate yourself from guys that you might be on the same level with talent-wise, but you're ahead of them maturity-wise. Those are the guys that come into a program and have an opportunity to compete from day one.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so lastly, Zeke, talking about the players that, like you said, you can separate yourself by being just a mature player. But are there things when you're out on the recruiting trail that are just immediately you're like, no, I can't recruit this guy. He's jogging down the line, or he's mouthing off to the coach, or he's hanging his head every time he strikes out. But then he's also the guy that when he hits a double, he's doing he's doing this on second base.
Yeah.
Like, what are the things when you're out on the trail that are just like, oh my gosh, unless he's just like too good to not get, you're just like, I don't know if I can do this.
It's body language, 100%. I can't do bad body language. It reminds me of the book, The Energy Bus by John Gordon. Energy vampires. You don't want energy vampires in your program. You want guys that bring it every single day, guys that have a smile on their face, that are happy to be there, that are happy to be in your program. Because if you get a bunch of guys that have bad body language, that is going to rub off on other guys. And it's probably going to rub off on the coaches too. And coaches are going to hate being around you. So one way for me to cross you off the list immediately is have bad body language.
That's great, man. Hey, Zeke, I appreciate you coming on here, man. I think you passed the test. We'll invite you back. We'll give you, we'll give you the holidays. You got some stuff coming up, I know. But certainly, hey, as we get closer to the season, man, we'll start talking maybe the outlook for Kent State, what you guys are thinking you can do this year. But thanks for coming on, dude, and appreciate answering all the questions with all the guys in the chat, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you as always, Kyle. Enjoyed it.
All right, man. Have a good rest of your day, Zeke. Good talking with you. All right, guys, that's Zeke Pinkham. Again, what's funny, guys, is and Canes, and some of you guys that have been in some of these streams now pretty consistently. And sorry, Canes, I know we weren't able to get some of these questions at the end, but Zeke, he gave us an hour. I told him 45 minutes. He gave us an hour. Okay, so he gave us some extra time. But isn't it funny that a lot of the stuff I've been telling you guys, that was just immediate answers from Zeke? The reality is two-way guys, way more important now. Positionally versatile guys, way more important now. How you carry yourself on the field can just rub a coach the wrong way. It's not just about your talent. Again, if you're one of the elite guys, sure, coaches may deal with it. But if you're not, if you're one of those kind of tier 2 players and you're the guy that every time they show up, man, his body language is terrible, then they're not going to want to deal with it. Right. And so, Canes, let me see if I can answer your last question. My last question, you don't have to go into specifics, was Kent State operating at 11.7 last season? I know some mid-majors didn't even get to 11.7. I can't answer that for him, but obviously he said their goal is to get to 17, 18, 19 at possible. So it looks like Kent State is going to be one of the mid-majors that's pushing that scholarship limit as much as they can. Right. And we've talked about it, guys, the 17, 17 is kind of that golden number that you can get to, because then you can offer 50%. And then any academic money on top of that, a kid is basically not paying for his school, right? So if a mid-major, you don't need to get to 30 or, maybe all full rides like we've heard some programs may be doing soon. You just get to 17 and all of a sudden you're good. Because then you're 50% to everybody, or you can pick and choose and offer a bigger scholarship to maybe a bigger time player. Without a doubt, the coach that has answered the most questions about recruiting. Whoa, big time from Zeke. Big time compliments from Canes. And remember, guys, we're gonna start having more on next week. We're gonna have. I talked with Josh Elander yesterday from Tennessee, their recruiting coordinator. He's gonna be on. Tentatively speaking, next week, probably later in the week around Thursday or Friday. But that's the plan, is to start getting more guys on here. So you guys aren't just hearing this from me. You're hearing this from actual coaches that are in programs right now recruiting on that side. Right. And I do just, it's hilarious. Zeke and I were roommates on the road when we were coaching together, and, so we were, again, a lot of times, guys, you guys don't realize how much work coaches put in. We're on the road in a hotel up till 3 a.m, watching film, trying to get advantages on the other team. Right. And he's a hard worker. He was out all summer this summer with Georgia Tech. And then when he was hired by Kent State. So, I think he's going to do a heck of a job at Kent State. And again, it's a storied program that has won for a long time. And certainly, if you're a player out there and you're I never heard of Kent State, it's one of the best mid-major programs in the country in college baseball. Certainly one of the top programs in the Midwest. Hopefully the Tennessee coach can talk about his recruits like Zeke did. Yeah, I think he will. And again, we'll screen, Canes. I'll make sure that you're behaving yourself with the questions. Zeke gave us some good info about the recruits they have committed without saying their names. Yeah, and again, he's he wants you to know. He was dead honest. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for projectable pitchers that throw 2 pitches with 2 strikes. Guys, what have I told you in some of my videos? What have I told you? They don't care that you can throw hard if you can't command 2 pitches for a strike minimum. They need guys that compete in the zone. The strike zone in college baseball, and I didn't get to ask him this because it was just we were flowing with so many questions and everything, but like when Zeke and I was playing, and Zeke's younger than me. So he was playing at Louisville, from that 2016, 2017 to 2019 range. So he's about, 4 years after my time. But when we were in college, man, that strike zone was big. That strike zone was big. You didn't need the kind of command that's required now in college baseball. You could throw the ball, when I was playing, 4 inches off the plate, strike every time, almost every time. So you could live 4 inches off the plate and have a lot of success. And that's not the case anymore. Strike zones are way tighter. Again, they're going to mess up and call bad pitches strikes, but they're way tighter zones now. And that's all because of the TrackMan and everything. Because now, they get graded on this stuff. And you're on TV and they show the TrackMan and you just called one 5 inches off the plate, you're not going to have a job much longer. So I hope you guys got a lot of value out of that video. Again, that's going to be, certainly we're not going to do it every day, but we're going to line up. We're going to have a lineup of coaches ready to talk. We're going to have some elite sports advisors on the call from different regions talking about, what they're hearing, what they're seeing in recruiting in certain regions, whether it's the Midwest, Southeast, Northeast, etc. We're going to have a lot of interesting guests and, to bring you guys as much value as possible. So, what's going on in recruiting. That I'm not just blowing smoke and making stuff up on the fly. And I think I got to text Zeke and say, "Hey man, thanks." I got to tell him I appreciate him. Cause it was like everything I've said. That was his first answer out of the gate, right? That was his first answer. We need pitchers that can command 2 pitches for strikes. Velo's important, but you got to throw strikes. We can't have a guy up there that's scattering it. We need 2-way guys. We need guys that are versatile. We're recruiting for 1 year now. We're not recruiting to bring in guys that we're going to develop for 3 years, right? And he brought up John Giesler, who we both coached, and it's the reality is that John Giesler, the only reason he ever got an opportunity, I remember coaching him as a freshman and thinking, man, he's a hard worker, but just surrounded by the guys he was surrounded by, it's he's probably never going to play. And he didn't take no for an answer. He didn't, wallow in his misery because he didn't play for 2 years. He came to the field every day. He was the leader of the team, and he didn't play. That was the kind of guy he was, because that's how hard he worked out in the weight room, in the conditioning tests, at practice. He was just that guy, and now he's one of the best hitters in the ACC. I keep telling you guys, you control your destiny in this game. You control how far you go. And most guys, 98% of guys do not have the willpower and the discipline to do what John Giesler did. They don't. They'll give up. They're not playing. They're going to go out to the fraternities and party on the weekend when team's on the road. And they're not going to really show up to practice early and get early work in because I'm not going to play. But John Giesler didn't do that. He just kept his nose to the grindstone, and again, now he's one of the best hitters in the ACC. Bill, great content. Keep it coming. Appreciate it, man. We're gonna keep it coming. Chris Dominguez, you're on the clock, dude. Chris is a good friend of mine. Played against him in pro ball for a long time. We played against each other all the time. I'm definitely gonna reach out and get him scheduled to be on here, Canes. And I'm knowing him, he'll be like, let's do it today. That's just the kind of guy he is. And so, awesome guy. He's definitely going to be on. And again, we're going to get coaches from all levels, right? I'm going to get D2 coaches on here, JUCO, D3. We're going to get Power 4, mid-major, lower level D1, military academies. We talked with Preston Gainey last week, who, played at a military academy and played professionally. I want you guys to get the full perspective on what's going on in recruiting and in college baseball at all these different levels, because it's great to hear from the Power 4 coaches. That's probably going to get the most views. People are going to tune into that the most. But a lot of players now, like I've talked with you guys about, are just they're not going Power 4 out of high school, or they shouldn't. They should go to a mid-major school like Kent State, where you're going to get it. You're going to get developed by a great staff. Jeff Duncan, their head coach, has been there for a long time now. He played in the big leagues. So your head coach is a big leaguer. And trust me, Kent State, you'll get there and you'll think, man, I kind of love this place. but you do have that option on the table. If you're like, you know what, my dream has always been to go to a Power Four, then if you're good enough, you'll have that opportunity, right? So I want to make sure you guys are getting all aspects of this. You're getting info straight from the coaches at all levels. That way, you as parents and you as players know, all right, this is the situation. Like Tennessee's coach is saying the same thing. Penn State's coach is saying the same thing. Kyle's been telling us the truth. He hasn't been making this stuff up, right? So I'm going to end it there, guys. I think appreciate you guys asking questions. I think that was awesome. Like great communication with Zeke. Great questions that, again, I think, you guys got pretty clear answers on kind of what the state of recruiting is in college baseball now, how teams are recruiting. Again, you got a little window into how Kent State recruits and what the guys they're typically looking for. So keep it up. And I'll be announcing probably next week when I talk with Josh again about scheduling when he'll be on. Again, I think we'll be able to do it next week, and that's just kind of if it matches with his schedule. But he kind of gave me when I talked to him yesterday, he basically said, "Yep." He's like, "I'll be back in." I think he's with family right now, but he said, "I'll be back next week for a while, and will just let me know when." So should be exciting and a good conversation. And again, another good friend of mine who we played 2 years together in pro ball with the Atlanta Braves in the minor leagues. But appreciate you guys with all the questions and stuff. Again, if you're looking for, I always get this mixed up. If you're looking for help in the recruiting process, scan this QR code, fill out our form. We'll meet with you, talk to you about where we think, possible fits could be based on our evaluation of you from looking at video and your metrics and everything. And then talk about how our process works, how we work with our clients, why we've been so successful, and ultimately see if it's the right fit for you guys and we move forward. So appreciate all the support, guys. Again,